Yep, it's recording.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, I'm blind. I really cannot see.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm good. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because it's 7:20, and I know everyone else has other things to do. We definitely have more wedding stuff to do, so, this is important, but we want to get started. All right, so we decided to put this PowerPoint together because we wanted people that we know and care for, and just people in general, to know their rights when it comes to being stopped by an officer. So yeah, we both are very passionate about everything that's going on in our world right now. And so to add a little less fire to the fuel, we wanted to, or fuel to the fire, whatever it is, we wanted to get people educated on their rights as citizens in Ohio. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. We wanted to start off with kind of throwing out some definitions, some important things to know. These are kind of the fundamental basis for a lot of these rules and laws we're going to be talking about today. The first thing we want to talk about was probable cause, and really kind of explain what probable cause is, because you hear that term thrown around all the time. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's referring to requirements that police have to have in order to actually arrest you or search you or anything like that. They have to have a specific fact or circumstance to, search you, to arrest you, rather than just a hunch or some other random circumstance like pulling you over for a broken taillight or something like that. They have to have a very specific identifiable reason to conduct a search of yourself. Wanted to mention the Fourth Amendment because that's where your right to deny unreasonable searches and seizures comes from. And then the Fifth Amendment as well, that's where you get your right to remain silent. You hear that, plead the fifth all the time. That one is a very crucial right that you have when dealing with the police.
All right, so we wanted to start off with the first question. So what to do if a police officer asks you a question. This could be whether you're in your car, at your home, or you are like walking on the sidewalk. So the first thing is, in Ohio, the law requires you to identify yourself if you are, 1, suspected of a crime, or 2, a witness to a felony. So in order to figure if you are one of the two things, you just say, am I legally required to identify myself? If the answer is yes, then that's when you would need to provide your legal name, your date of birth, and your address. But be aware that even if you feel like you don't want to provide this information, if you refuse to do so, you can be arrested. So a lot of times we think that, I'm just like walking down the sidewalk on 4th Street, or I'm driving my car and I feel like I haven't done anything. But if, I ask this question and the officer does say that I have to legally state this information and I refuse, then that's grounds for me or anyone else who is denying the officer's request to be arrested. Number 3 is you do not, or you are not required to give a statement about anything that you witness or are suspected of. And so this goes back to the Fifth Amendment, which is talking about pleading the fifth and just remaining silent. You don't have to have or give any of that information, even if the officer is asking you. You have that right to remain silent. And then 4, you're not required to show an ID unless you are driving a vehicle. So unless you're driving a car, then you don't have to worry about showing a license. Or if they say they're about identifying yourself, you still don't have to show that license, but you just need to clearly state, the things that are listed in number 2.
All right, moving on here to another situation. You're wanting to know what to do if you're stopped by a law enforcement officer on foot. So, maybe you're walking, down to campus for a football game, or going down to Cazuela's or something here, wherever you may be walking around on foot, and an officer stops you. What should you do? First and most important thing is you need to stay calm. You don't want to kind of get riled up. You don't want to get antsy or start swearing at police or anything like that. Choppers flying overhead. And then calm yourself, collect yourself, ask if you're being detained. This has been important. If the answer is no, you are free to leave. The cops can't hold you there if you aren't being detained for any reason. If they do say, yes, you are being detained, you have to stay put, but you're not obligated to answer anything. It's really important that you clearly state, I would like to invoke my Fifth Amendment right to stay silent. It's important that you say that to them. Even if they keep speaking to you, if they keep asking you questions, if they try to intimidate you or say they're bringing in the SWAT team or the K-9 unit, just stay calm and state that you wish to remain silent, and you'll be good from there. It's also really important to note that law enforcement are legally allowed to lie to you. It's well within their right to do so, and it's an officer's job to find the suspect, not prove your innocence. So they're going to do what they can to figure out if you're a suspect or not. So again, it's important for you to let them know that you want to stay silent. Number 3 here, you're out walking on the street. If the cops suspect in any way that you might be carrying a weapon, they are allowed to pat you down. They cannot reach into any pockets or anything like that. They can't look into your purse or your backpack, fanny pack, anything like that. That would require probable cause or a search warrant. And it's important in those situations to say that you do not consent to a search of that nature. Number 5 here, if you think you may be under arrest for any reason, you should ask if you are under arrest. If you are under arrest, you have the right to know why you're being arrested. So it's important that they need to say that. They need to tell you why you're being arrested. If you aren't under arrest, you have the right to leave. And again, number 6 here, don't badmouth or run away from the cops. Don't resist or be physical. Even if you think you're being unjustly held, or it's wrong what they're doing, you just remember to stay calm. Anything you do like that could lead to your arrest, could lead to them accusing you of assaulting an officer, things like that. It's really important that you stay calm and don't kind of react anyway.
Yeah. All right, so our next section is what to do if you are stopped by law enforcement while you're in your car. So if you are stopped in your car, once again, you have to provide your registration, your driver's license, and proof of insurance upon request. And that's the biggest thing for both your passengers and yourself. Even, most of the times, most of the cases, we're just, it's like on autopilot when we're like, oh yeah, we have to provide all these things. But if an officer does not ask you, do not reach into your glove compartment, because then they could just suspect or assume that you are going to pull out a weapon. And case with Fernando Castillo, like, even though he had that permit, and even though the officer literally asked him to get that, he also knew that the gun was in the glove compartment. So when he was reaching for his license and his registration, the cop just thought that he was reaching for his gun. And I'm not saying that in any shape or form that what happened to him is right, but we just have to be cautious about that. And this is where I wanted to state a little bit of some information that I saw online, where people are doing this thing where they post their license, or they're posting their registration and proof of insurance either on their steering wheel or on the top of the little hood inside of your car. I don't know what that's actually called. But I thought that was a sweet idea, because unfortunately, most of us, as drivers, we put our information inside of our glove box, but sometimes the officer could get scared or think that because of the way that you look, that you have a weapon and you're going to harm them. So it just rather be safe than sorry to put that kind of information in full view. So when they do ask for that, you can just show that it's right there in front of them. And when they have their body cams showing, then they can see that clearly you have your registration and license all in front of you. All right. And second thing with your passengers, they don't have to provide that information unless they are asked by the officer. So this is the biggest thing. I've learned this. I think a couple of us know about this, but police actually cannot search your car without a warrant or without probable cause. And like Jonathan stated in the first slide, probable cause is not like, oh yeah, well, you look like you just murdered this person, or you look like this, blah, blah, blah. It's more of oh, I clearly see that evidence that, I'm smelling weed, or I see weed, or blah, blah, blah. If they see that, or they see a gun and they don't know if you have a license or not, or a permit or not, then that is when they can legally search your car. And then another thing we have to be aware of is if you if you say like, oh, like, I don't know what I was about to say, but I'll figure it out later. So another example of probable cause is, yeah, seeing contraband or smelling it, but making sure that, you know, things like minor traffic violations are not considered probable cause. I just wanted to state that I always thought that because police officers were authoritative figures, that if they asked me to search my car, then I would have to say yes. Or if I said no, like this statement says that I'm guilty of something I didn't do, that is not the case. They have to clearly see something that is illegal in your car. And another thing too is, even with probable cause, if they say like, oh, you know, this license plate was ran and we saw that someone over at Big Lot said that you had stolen a TV, they can look in your, like, they can look through your windows and clearly they won't see a TV, but they can't go and search your glove box because clearly a TV cannot fit there. That's when they would have to be like, oh, well, a TV can only fit in the back seat of your car or in your trunk. And that's when they can search it. But besides that, they can't go look other places where that stolen item or contraband could be if it's not in plain sight or able to fit in that area. So number three goes with number two a little bit. Don't consent to searches. This is a big thing. Officers will literally ask you if they can search your car. You have the right to say no. And so you just have to be aware that sometimes it, like I said before, just because they're a police officer, it might seem like, oh, because they're, you know, they're this authoritative figure that I have to listen to them, but you do have that right to say no to consenting to searches. And then the last thing, Jonathan mentioned this in the one about if you get pulled over on foot, remaining silent. But the biggest thing about that is that you need to make sure you tell the officer that you are invoking your Fifth Amendment right. So, for example, if an officer's asking me questions and I just don't say anything, that is not fair because he just might think that I'm ignoring him or being disrespectful, and then he can use that against me. I need to say, if I don't have to legally answer these questions or I'm not required to, then I'm going to go ahead and invoke my Fifth Amendment right and I'm going to remain silent. And then they know that you are doing that because of the right that you have as a citizen of the United States.
All right, continuing on with these the traffic stops here. Number 5, it's important to ask if you're being detained or if you're free to go. You know, a routine traffic stop should only, you know, take so much time. And if you're being held longer than you feel is necessary, it's important to ask if you're being detained. If you're not being detained, then you're free to leave. The officer can't, you know, hold you any longer. If you are being detained, you know, state that you want to remain silent and that you want to talk to your lawyer. Don't say anything else. Make sure you clearly state that you want to remain silent and that you want to speak to your lawyer. And then number 6 here, law enforcement can and often will use loopholes and tricky language and things like that to get you to consent to search. You know, might say questions in a confusing way like, you don't mind if I search your car, you know, don't you? Or they might even throw things out like, I'm going to bring the canine dogs to sniff your car if you don't consent to this search. Or, you know, if you just consent to this search, you know, you'll be on your way, no harm, no foul, all that. But it's important to know, like I said, cops aren't there to prove you're innocent. Cops are there to find a suspect and arrest somebody. And you might run into one of those cops that'll plant evidence or who will, you know, trash your whole car or things like that. So it's really important for you to clearly state that you don't consent to a search, even if they start being tricky or threatening you in any way.
Okay, so we talked about a couple of these rights already, but we wanted to get it drilled in everyone's head about knowing their rights. So we're just going to go through all the ones that people as citizens in Ohio, because I do want to make it clear that this is specifically for Ohio. So if you do go to another state and you're like, oh, I remember this class, then you have to be aware that some of the rights in a different state, as in like maybe, I don't know, Illinois, I don't know, Illinois, not Illinois, could have different rights, but they are going to most likely be the same, especially when it comes to your amendments. Like that's, you know, United States, so you don't have to worry about that. So, number one, remember that anything you say or do can be used against you in court. So we have to be careful about what we're saying, which is also, number two, like be careful about your words and your movements, because if you do end up going to court, then an officer could use what you're saying against you later on, even if it has nothing to do with why you got arrested. So that's why it is very important to invoke that Fifth Amendment right of remaining silent on, pleading the fifth. And then going a little bit more about being careful about your movements and your body language and emotions. A lot of times we see that, if an officer is like doing something that is really unlawful, like, most of the times you're going to flinch. Like if someone's on top of you and they're putting their whole body weight, like you're going to move around. And it's really hard to tell people, hey, if that's happening, stay still. But unfortunately, like even if you move around, let's say a cop was on top of me and I like couldn't breathe and I was trying to move around and I ended up surviving that incident, if I flinched or if I like moved my arms and accidentally hit an officer, that doesn't matter if it's accident or it's purpose, like that's still on me and I can still get arrested for assaulting an officer. And it sucks because, you see so many incidents where people are literally terrified for their lives, and they are upset and they want to say words, or they accidentally like hit an officer because they're trying to adjust something. They could still use that to arrest you. So you have to be very careful about what you say and what you do. Another one is don't get in an argument or lie to the police. A lot of times, we think that police officers don't need to know our jobs or stuff like that. But if they ask us where we work, instead of saying, oh, I work at Kroger, where in fact you work as an engineer, you could just say, I don't have to legally answer that question, so I'm going to plead the fifth. Because if you do lie, that is a probable cause to arrest you. So number 4, keep your hands where the police can see them. I mentioned this in the last one about, just thinking cautiously about where you do put your registration or any other like proof of insurance, because, officers with the body cams or without body cams could just think that you're reaching for something that could harm them. So they might actively like shoot or try to pull you out of your car, or whatever it may be. And once again, it is very unfortunate that we have to be in this situation. But I think it's really smart to think of like better places, to put that information instead of your glove box, because a lot of times officers might think that you are, trying to reach for something that can harm them or for yourself even. All right. Number 5, don't run, don't touch any police officer, and don't resist even if you believe you're innocent. This goes, I think, with number 2 even, where, we just saw an incident where a guy was, sleeping in his car at Wendy's and the police were called on him and he got scared because of everything that's going on and just living as a Black man. And he ended up hitting the officers, which, he could have got arrested for if he were alive, but he also ran away. And, not saying that what he did about running away gave him, the officers a right to shoot or kill that innocent man. But unfortunately, it is a thing that they could, think that you're guilty of something. So they're going to try to attack you or they're going to arrest you later. So you have to be very careful about these situations. And it sucks because there's no like information on like what to do if you are being like illegally like searched, or if you are being racially profiled by a police officer and they're harming you. Like how does one stay like silent, and how does one stay without movement? Like that is very hard. And there's nothing that I was able to research to do that, but unfortunately that is the law, where if you do any of those things, then you could go from being innocent to being guilty. So number 6, a big thing is do not complain on the scene. Tell the officer that they are wrong, or let them know that you are going to file a lawsuit or complaint. This could just get the officer upset, and then he, with his knowledge, because most times they might have more knowledge than us, but that's the point of this class, that you have that knowledge that they also have. But they might try to find a way to get you arrested if you do threaten them, or you say like, I'm going to call your like the higher ups, or I'm going to tell the mayor and the governor about what you're doing, and I'm going to like file a lawsuit against you and against the police department. Those things are not going to help you. Keep those things to yourself. Keep those things between you and your lawyer, but just don't say it to the police officers on the scene. Number 7 is do not make any statements regarding the incident. So whether you're guilty or you're not guilty, just keep drilling in your head that you have that right to remain silent, and it is really important for you to do so. And then I said this earlier before, but once again, in order to reserve your Fifth Amendment right, you need to let the officer, law enforcement, know that you were indeed doing so, because without that, they might find it to be disrespectful if you're ignoring them or you're not speaking. But if you let them know that this is my God-given right to, remain silent, then they will understand that you're not being disrespectful or ignoring them. So we have a couple more, and then Jonathan's gonna finish them.
So we're at number 9 here. If you do get arrested, hopefully at this point you have already pleaded your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. You also should ask to get in touch with a lawyer or ask for a court-appointed lawyer. Make sure if you do, happen to know somebody to call, you happen to have a lawyer, to call or whatever. Make sure if you're going to call somebody, you call your lawyer. Don't call a friend or anything like that if you can help it. Again, going back to anything you say or do can and will be used against you in a court of law. If you are talking to your lawyer, they can't use whatever you say to the lawyer against you because of attorney-client privilege. But if you're calling a buddy or a family member, that's not an attorney, they can use what you're saying to your friend or your family member against you. So it's really important if you're going to call and get in touch with somebody, you want to get in touch with a lawyer or ask for that court-appointed attorney. Number 10 here, if you have the ability to, or if you're with somebody who has the ability to, write down or record anything you see, anything you remember, things like officer badge numbers, patrol car numbers. If there were any other witnesses, try and get their names and contact information. Because if you're being arrested for something that you feel is wrong, these things are going to be able to help you out in court. Your lawyer will be able to help you out and use this information for your benefit. Let's see, this is number 11 here. Yeah. Chopper number 2 flying by. Number 11, if you get injured in any way and you have the ability to do so, record the injuries, take photos, video, anything like that. Seek medical attention if you can, obviously. But again, recording these things is going to help you out in your case later on if you have that information. Like I said, cops can lie. They can make up stories how you got injured. We saw with that guy in Buffalo, New York, when the cops pushed him over, he cracked his head open, and the cops in their report said, oh, he just tripped. If we didn't have the video evidence showing the cops pushing him over, people would have taken the police report as truth and moved on with it. So it's really important if you can to have that stuff recorded. Also just important too, if you're a bystander, to be recording interactions with police if you can too, because that stuff can save people's lives. And then number 12 here, again, we just want to reiterate, don't consent to a search of yourself, your car, your cell phone, fanny pack, backpack, purse, any of your personal belongings, anything like that. Don't consent to searches. The only time a cop can search any of those things is if they have a warrant or probable cause. The only time anyone can search your house is if they have a warrant or the cops suspect a criminal has entered your home. So just remember again, clearly state you do not consent to a search. Ask for warrants if they have them. Read the warrant to make sure it applies to you. Super duper important, and will keep you from getting abused by law enforcement.
All right, so I just went ahead and put some of the resources, all of the resources that we gathered all of this information. So just in case you wanted to check this out or you wanted to fact check everything that we said. And I also want to reiterate the fact that, you see a couple of these that are specifically for Ohio. So if you are, end up moving to a different state or you're just going to visit some people in a different state, you do need to look up that information because it can definitely be different. And just because you're in a different state doesn't mean you won't be pulled over by the officer or the police. So yeah, once again, Jonathan and I have been very passionate about what is going on, and we just wanted to educate people about their rights when it does come to being pulled over. Whether you are Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, like your ethnicity, nationality, or any of your race doesn't matter, because even if I got pulled over and I was racially profiled and Jonathan actually knew his rights, then we could declare like what you're doing is illegal and you can end up being in trouble. I clearly don't state that because, like I said, they could use that against me, or they could think that I'm bad mouthing them. But just being able to say, I know that I have the right to deny this consent or this search. I do not give consent to it. I know I have the right to remain silent as long as I let you know that I am invoking that Fifth Amendment right. So yeah, just check up on any of these websites if you want more information, and if you want to know more about your amendments, there are many, but there are many resources that can give you that information, because it is very important to know your rights. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, we would be more than happy to answer any of the ones that we are, well aware of. Thank you, guys. This is my email, but I don't think anyone needs to email me. I don't even know if my email is on there.
Yeah, I thought this is fantastic. Really good information, easy to follow, super helpful. What do y'all feel like are some things that you learned in putting this together that you hadn't known before?
Ooh, that's a good question. I always thought that if officer tells me to do something, then I have to do it. That's the biggest thing that I learned. I was like, oh, like they're officer, they know better than me. But looking up and making sure, like, oh, if they request this information, then you do have to give it to them. But if they don't, then you don't have to relay that information back to the officer. Or even like with your case, you're talking about when you're dropping someone off after church in Westerville, and then the cop was like, oh, I feel like you might have drugs or blah, 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 because I don't know if it was a stop sign, you rolled, you didn't completely stop. I believe that was it, but like an officer saying, like, if someone didn't know that and they're like, oh, we would like to search your car, and you weren't aware of your rights, you could have been like, yeah, because you thought that you'd have to consent to that search. So that was the biggest thing for me. I definitely learned a lot, and so that helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I think I guess one of the bigger things I took away from doing research on this was just how important it is for you to not say a single thing to the police officers. There was a video on YouTube from a law professor who was going through a whole bunch of different scenarios of like, all right, so you're in this situation, you believe you're innocent, but you said X, Y, Z. Here's how the cops will use that against you. And bringing in a bunch of different scenarios and just realizing how easy it is for, in good faith, trying to like thinking you're helping out by saying, oh no, I wasn't their officer. No, I've never even been there. I've never even seen that person before. But then they find out later that you actually have been in that area before, and then they have a witness who may or may not have seen you in that area. It's like, just because you were trying to be helpful, now you've accidentally incriminated yourself in an attempt to be helpful. It's like, it's just so crazy how like you can be in a situation where you're trying to help like apprehend somebody who, might need to be arrested. And in doing so, like, you just screwed yourself over just trying to be a helpful citizen. And so that's why, knowing this stuff is important, because, it's a good citizen should know that they shouldn't incriminate themselves, and should be aware that, I think too, hearing a police officer too in a video directly state that they're not there to prove your innocence, they're there to find a guilty party, and they'll do whatever they can to find that guilty party was also kind of sobering to hear, and kind of reinforce how important it is for you to kind of stick to, remaining silent, stick to not consenting to searches, stick to getting in touch with a lawyer. Otherwise, you just inadvertently get yourself in trouble. So
that's super important. That's pretty powerful too. One of the things that I know is that typically between the ages of 16 and 19, these things aren't really known, and so it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s where I was in a situation where I was pulled over, and the officers asked if they could search me, and I'm like, no, I know you can't do that anymore. And they actually had brought up that statement, well, we're going to bring the canine unit out, and they're going to circle your car. We're going to circle the car with the canine unit. And if the dog starts scratching at your car, we're going to tear your seats up if you don't let me search your vehicle. And, I looked at him and I said, hey, you got to do what you got to do, man. Like, if you want to bring the canine out, that's your prerogative, but I don't consent to a search. And, I called his bluff, and he ended up letting me go. But all of that was on the basis of, you didn't make a complete 4-wheel stop at a stop sign. And I even had stated I did, and I didn't have to, but at that time I said, I'm always cautious when I drive in the suburbs to make sure I do everything legally right. So I think what you said there, like all this information is super important. And I guess my prayer is that a lot of the younger folks, and even some folks that are older that may have not known these things, that this information will get in their hands and would just help prevent something that shouldn't happen.
Mhm.
Sweet.
Sweet.
Thank you so much for recording. Oh my goodness. I was like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to have taken part in this. This was super helpful.
Thank you.
I am too.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tika's been listening in the background, so.
Thanks, Tika.
Yeah. Thanks to
Maybe
everybody
goodbye.
else who tuned in too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
I'm excited for next week to hear what you and Jordan have to put together.
Yeah. Hopefully it's helpful.
Yes. Oh, it will be. Trust me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I don't know how much longer I have because I have the basic.
Yeah, I can go ahead and stop record now. And
Okay.